Okay, I'm John Dinger, and you're listening to Gospel Tangents.
Is supported by users like you. Please support us at gospeltangents.com or on Patreon. It's the best source for Mormon history, science, and theology. I'm Rick Bennett. I'm excited to have two authors on the show. We've got Cheryl Bruno and John Dinger. They are co-authors of Come Hither to Zion. It's the biography of William Marks, and we're going to be giving away a free autographed copy by both Cheryl and John of this book here. Go to gospeltangents.com/contest, and you could win the final copy of this. In our next conversation, we're going to dive into the story of William Marks and learn about a little bit about his conversion and his time in Nauvoo. So you won't want to miss it. Check it out. Welcome to Gospel Tangents. I'm excited to have two very busy authors. John, could you go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience and tell us where you live?
All right. I'm John Dinger. I'm an independent historian. I am currently up near the Boise, Idaho area.
Yes, and you're a lawyer too, right?
I am a lawyer up there, a prosecuting attorney.
Okay, so we can make lawyer jokes here, right?
Absolutely.
All right, and Cheryl, you're a return guest, but for those of you who may not have seen, tell us a little bit about yourself and what book have you and John written together?
I'm Cheryl Bruno, and I'm from the Monterey area of California, and we have written this book called Come Up Hither to Zion, William Marks and the Mormon Concept of Gathering. I've written so many books that I can't remember all their titles.
I know. You've been busy.
Title.
Both of you have, because that's not all. That's the first book we're going to talk about today, but they've also written chapters in Secret Covenants. I got to remember the subtitle. New Insights on Early Mormon Polygamy. Oh, John's got one too.
There we go.
Right. Now, in fairness, Cheryl did a bit more than just write a chapter. I just wrote a chapter. Cheryl did a lot more on this one.
Yeah, Cheryl's the editor of Secret Covenants, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit, but wanted to first talk a little bit about William Marks. Now, I know Cheryl, well, we talked about this last time. We had way too short of time. But go ahead and share again what you said. I think it was at MHA about William Marks to introduce the topic to everybody.
Oh, I asked everybody who in the audience knew more than 3 facts about William Marks, and there's hardly anyone that knew very much about him because he's not a well-known figure, although in Mormonism he should be.
Yeah.
So we decided to write a biography about him so we could rectify the situation.
And it's a fantastic biography. I just finished it on Wednesday of Thursday last week. I was talking to John, and I think it should win Best Biography.
But there are so many biographies that are coming out this year that are very good, so it will be very competitive this year.
Oh, there's a lot of really good books.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
For sure. So what got you guys to decide to write this book?
Well, I'll tell you where I came from with William Marks, and then Cheryl can tell you and kind of how we met up to do this. I edited the Nauvoo High Council and City Council minutes.
Oh, that's right.
Back in the early 2000s. And as I did that, I know they're just, legal and, documents of hearings and things like that. But really,
your bailiwick, right?
Yes, I do like that. But truly, a hero sort of emerged in the story, surprising to me. Like, I wasn't expecting that. And it was this man named William Marks. And he was kind of involved in everything. He was the stake president, so he was over the High Council. But then he was also on the City Council and kind of popped up everywhere. And before I started doing this project, I was one of those people that really didn't know 3 facts about William Marks. And so as I went through it, he was just such a man of integrity, so integral to everything in Nauvoo, yet I had heard so little about him. And then near the end of the High Council minutes, there was something that just really struck out to me about his integrity, and that was at the excommunication of Sidney Rigdon, where it was a pile-on Sidney Rigdon, and Marks, knowing the rules that the Revelations talk about with the High Council and other things that Joseph Smith put in place, he knew to make it a legal and proper meeting, he had to speak in Rigdon's behalf. And I think he knew what this would do to him but he was, he wanted to follow the revelations and follow the teachings of Joseph Smith, and so he stuck up for Rigdon. He spoke in his behalf, and it ended up just as he probably knew it would, eventually being run out of Nauvoo, and so he was just such this incredible individual. And then as I looked later, where he just, I've always considered him sort of always seeking for Joseph's, always kind of looking for that Kirtland Mormonism. And so after he was run out of Nauvoo, he kind of bounced around, and I was always so impressed with his integrity there until he ended up with Joseph III in the RLDS, now Community of Christ. And so so from there, I just collected sources, and I presented on him at different conferences, wrote articles, which I always intended to sort of be chapters, and I don't have the energy of Cheryl, and so I'm so glad we combined forces.
Well, I was just going to say, so even a prosecuting attorney can admire a defense attorney once in a while, huh?
Sure.
Right.
So Cheryl, tell us how you got interested in William Marks.
Well, I was doing research on Freemasonry, and William Marks appears in the Masonic Minutes. There were about 30 people who were already Freemasons in Nauvoo, and they decided to get together and form a lodge. And Joseph Smith was very involved in this. William Marks, along with Brigham Young and several others, were some of the first to petition this new lodge to become members. And he did this along with his son, who was in his early 20s, but his son died before he could get fully initiated into the lodge. But William Marks did, and he was one of the early Nauvoo Freemasons. So that kind of piqued my interest. Who was this guy?
Oh, Freemasons. Well, you don't know anything about that.
Oh, I know a lot about them. But I didn't, also like John, I didn't know a lot about William Marks. And as I read John's papers on William Marks, he became very intriguing to me.
Oh, very good. So it sounds like you came to this independently. How did you discover you had a shared interest?
Well, we are both on a Facebook group that discusses Mormon history. And one day somebody had posted up, tell us about your projects that you're working on, or your new project. And I said, well, I'm going to write a biography of William Marks. And John chimed in, he said, wait a minute, I'm going to write a biography on William Marks. So I said, well, I think I'll withdraw because you've already written, several papers on him, and you're kind of the William Marks guy. So I'll probably back off. And he said, no, let's collaborate on it. Oh. And I thought that was a wonderful idea. And the collaboration has been fantastic. I think the biography is much better from having both of our perspectives on William Marks. So it's just been a great collaboration. Anything to add?
I am so glad she said yes. I'd been working on it since I've been doing the Nauvoo Minutes. And
so that's like at least 20 years then, right?
Not quite, but yes.
Okay.
Yes, probably more like 15. And so by working on it very, very slowly, right? Churning out a paper or a conference every once in a while. So Cheryl kicked, yes. So I am so grateful that she jumped on this.
And it really didn't take much more than a year, did it, to put it all together? And
oh, wow.
It was fabulous because we could, the reason I love collaboration is because you can find a document and then you can call your co-author and say, look what I just found, and they'll be excited about it, and you can bash it back and forth. Yeah. And sometimes we had disagreements, and so we were able to work those through and see, where the weaknesses were, and so it's just fabulous.
Well, very good. That's awesome. So Cheryl, you've been really good at pushing stuff across the finish line. Not only William Marks, Secret Covenants, you gathered a lot of people. You took over the Freemasonry book. Give us a plug on that really quick.
Method Infinite. That's great. I'm also co-author on that one with two very fabulous Freemasons.
Okay, and they are?
Joe Steve Swick III and Nicholas Latursky.
Okay. So because I know that was another thing where it sounds like you're like the coach, you can get it across the finish line, right? Because you joined that after Nick and Joe had already been working on it.
Nick had spent years and years collecting information on that, 10 years at least. And then Joe spent years. I spent about 10 years, so it was like 30 years in the making. That was a very difficult book, and you'll find that it's very dense.
Yeah.
But I was the one that kept saying, we need to just quit collecting things and just start writing. Because you can go forever collecting things.
Well,
you really can.
And then your chapter, I know you took over for the late Johnny Stevenson.
That's correct.
Can you just real briefly, we'll talk about that later in detail, but
Okay.
really briefly.
Well, Johnny Stevenson had done some research on Emma Smith, which he was kind of batting back and forth with me, and then he died, and most of his research was lost because he had it on his computer, and no one could then get into his computer after he died. So that was very tragic. But I had some of his early research on this subject, and I felt it was too good to go to waste. So I finished working on that.
Okay, well, you're the finisher. Just like
I guess you can call me that. That can be
marketing
my
for the
wrestling
Utah
name.
Jazz. Well, very good. Well, let's dive into William Marks. I'll let you guys, paper, scissors, rock here. Where did William Marks come from, and how did he encounter the church?
Well, that's something where I think we have a theory, but we're not entirely sure.
Okay.
So at some point, his sister was living, her farm backed Warren Cowdery's farm. And they joined the church. And so we think it came from there. Does that sound about right?
Right, because her, let's see, what his sister's name was Prudence Miles?
Prudence Miles.
She had married a man named Samuel Miles, and he and his son went to hear the Mormons preach. And somehow in there, we don't have a lot of information, but somehow in there, William Marks, who lived not too far away in Freedom, or in that area, heard about it, and so he investigated, and shortly thereafter joined as well.
Okay. Well, very good. Where do we know where he joined the church?
So in Freedom, New York.
Okay. So is that close to Palmyra or something? I don't know where Freedom is.
Yeah.
Close enough. It's in the same state at least.
Yes.
All right. And so then let's talk about how he teamed up with Joseph Smith. How did that happen, Cheryl?
How he teamed up with Joseph Smith? Well, he moved to Kirtland fairly soon after. He was kind of in charge of like 3 different branches of the church, and reported for them at a conference, at a Freedom conference. And then right after that, he was made an elder in the church and then moved to Kirtland. So I'm not sure that he ever met Joseph Smith before he moved to Kirtland.
Oh.
He had associations with the missionaries in New York, but then he moved to Kirtland and right away gained a favor of Joseph Smith. He was an older man, he was more wealthy, and he was kind of a solid citizen. And so I think Joseph Smith felt that he could take over some of the businesses that needed to have a figurehead.
So kind of a Sidney Rigdon type character without the preaching.
Yeah, he wasn't much of a preacher.
Okay.
But he was financially sound, and he was all through his life he was involved in several different businesses and was able to have a good living from them.
Which Joseph Smith definitely was not good at business.
Right.
Right.
John, can you tell us a little bit more about this Kirtland area? What do we need to know about William Marks there?
Well, so sometimes I think we forget how young Joseph Smith and the rest of the early leaders of the church was. So William Marks was born in 1792. So in Kirtland, he would have been in his mid-40s. And then in, and I'm in my mid-40s, so he was still a young man. But no, he was sort of older for church leadership, but he was very trusted.
That means we're getting old if we think 40 is really young.
Right. But he did. He took over certain businesses for Joseph Smith, the Messenger and Advocate. He owned the Kirtland Temple. It was
I was
deeded
going to ask
him,
about that.
For a bit. And then it gets very murky, gives it back to the 12 for $1 in 1844, I believe. But he was just very trusted. And then he kind of had to stick around and clean up the mess after Joseph left.
With the bank.
Yeah.
Can you give us more details on the bank and why did he own the Kirtland Temple?
Well, Joseph Smith was in a lot of financial trouble. And I think that he wanted to divest himself of some of the properties so that they couldn't come after and attach them. See, I'm not a lawyer, but I think that's the word, to any lawsuits.
Jump in, John, when you need to.
Right? That's why I needed him in the book. So then Joseph Smith would deed these properties over to the Markses. I think several of them were in both Rosanna and William's name. And so then they owned them in name, and he trusted him to take care of them so that they wouldn't be in his name and able to be seized for his other debts.
Okay, so when the Kirtland Bank failed, it seems like there was pretty much everybody in Kirtland was like, Joseph's a crook, except for Brigham Young. And it sounds like maybe William Marks. Is that true, John?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he never said Brigham was a crook. He was very loyal to Brigham.
Well, yeah, Brigham.
He never said Joseph was a crook.
Okay.
Yeah.
He was very loyal to Joseph throughout his life.
Okay. And I'm trying to remember, you read so many books and you can't remember what you read in which book, but did he didn't lose a lot of money in the Kirtland Bank. Is that right?
Not that we can tell.
Yeah.
It doesn't appear that way.
Which would probably make it easier to forgive Joseph, right? When you don't lose all your life savings.
Yeah. Yeah, let me think. He was also on the High Council there. That's where he first got his sort of he ran the branches in New York, but yeah, then in Kirtland he was made a member of the High Council.
And the stake president there.
And stake president there
So
at the
he
end.
had several stints as stake president.
He did. Yeah, but it was his job as many of the saints left. He was supposed to kind of help wrap up business, sell property, do what he could before he left for Missouri.
Okay. And then, so because the bank failed, Joseph heads out of town in the cover of darkness. And so he sells the temple to William Marks just to keep it out of creditors' hands?
Before he left, it was quite a while before he left. It was when William Marks first arrived that he was put in charge of the Messenger and Advocate and other properties like the Kirtland Temple.
Okay. Is there anything else in this Kirtland period we need to discuss?
Well, I think he really helped people with their properties, wrapping up things and being able to move to Missouri. And he was cleaning up all kinds of things. And so I think it really, when Joseph Smith wrote a letter and said, basically get your butt over here to Missouri, and wasn't very nice about it, I think it must have kind of struck him like, here I am doing your dirty work, and now you're, criticizing me for not getting over to Missouri fast enough. So he was one of the very last people to leave Missouri. After there was a camp called, what was it called? Kirtland Camp, or the Kirtland Camp, I believe, where kind of the last straggler people all got together and formed a company to go over. And he kind of waved them goodbye out of town, and then he was kind of one of the last ones to leave and got to Missouri just as they were being kicked out, like almost to the day that they were being kicked out and had to leave.
And what's important about that Marx has sometimes been vilified by LDS, I was going to say scholars, but I don't think scholars, writers in the past. And one of the big things they've criticized him for is he disobeyed Joseph Smith's revelation and didn't go to Missouri. But we were able to find documents that showed he was, in fact, in Missouri and did obey the revelation from Joseph Smith.
Right.
Okay.
We even have some accounts that tell a little bit about his journey over, and some very interesting, if you read the book, some very interesting things about his journey over to Missouri.
Okay. Well, let's talk about his journey to Missouri.
Well, he met up with, what's the guy's name?
Rogers and Chandler?
Russell? Was it Russell?
Russell? Oh.
Yeah, we. Once you read a book, you're like, okay,
Right.
let's forget about that for a while. But he met up with some very interesting characters, one of whom was almost an apostate. He was gathering people together to kind of make a little branch of his own on the side, And so he took over that company, sent William Marks back to bring his wife back from Missouri, and then kind of took over that company in the middle of winter and, made him go through all kinds of hardships while William Marks was away. And it was a pretty big company not a huge company, but I'd say like 12 families or so, that this guy Russell, I think his name was, right? Isaac Russell? No, I don't. I'll open the book.
It's right there.
Let's find out his name, because
All right.
really he was such an interesting character. Isaac Russell. Yeah, he was a British immigrant who joined the church in Toronto. So he was the one that was kind of crazy guy, and it's fun to read about him.
Yeah. Well, you could say that about a lot of the early leaders. We're the crazy guy, right?
Some of the early Mormons were quite colorful.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. All right. So he spends very little time, basically gets to Missouri, and then they got to leave again.
Yep.
So Joseph gets arrested for the Missouri War, basically. And William Marks takes everybody to Quincy, is that right?
Yeah. I mean, they spend a short time in Quincy. They're sort of scattered all over the place.
Okay. So they're just basically scattered. Eventually they're going to get to Nauvoo, though, and then Joseph appreciates his leadership ability, and he becomes the stake president of Nauvoo once again.
Right away, he's made the stake president.
Yes.
Okay. And so can we talk a little bit about, he was so good with business. Can we talk a little bit about why, or how Joseph saw that in him, and why, oh, you're a good business leader, well, let's make you stake president?
Well, yeah, because one thing that I think will be shown in the book is the city government came after the ecclesiastical government.
Right.
So the High Council was really, in a way, the city council for quite some time. And so Marx, talking about his business, his intelligence, his ability to organize and lead people, was very important because he really helped set up the city of Nauvoo. I mean, in a way, almost the mayor as well. They did sort of handle all the initial, what normally we would call crimes, because there wasn't really a court system, and that was through the qualities and leadership of William Marks.
Well, and that's one of the things I found interesting, because they didn't have a legal framework. That I guess the main tool was you're excommunicated or you're disfellowshipped. Right. Yeah. It's always seen that Joseph was very forgiving, and people usually came right back, which isn't the case anymore, it seems like. But
and it wasn't always just excommunicating and cutting off. The High Council gave a place where people could mediate. So it wasn't just one guy's bad, you're cut off. It's okay. Let's hear this. All right. Hey, we think person B is right. Person A apologized. Work it out. And so it was it was sort of a way to mediate and keep people happy and things going in Nauvoo.
He sounds a lot like a lawyer.
Maybe.
No wonder you like him so much.
And William Marks wasn't a strong leader as to authoritarian. But I think he was more like that, where he could meet with people and work things out. And he usually, in the High Council, it seemed like his method of operation was not just, okay, everyone's going to do what I say, but what do you have to say? And ask each person, what they thought, so that they could really discuss the issues.
Yeah. I hope you enjoyed a conversation with Cheryl Bruno and John Dinger. They are the co-authors of Come Up Hither to Zion, the biography of William Marks. In our next conversation, we're going to go into Mark's views on polygamy and what he thought about that in Nauvoo, as well as the martyrdom of Joseph Smith and William Marks defending Sidney Rigdon.
Right. So what's interesting is this is years later, when he is serving as first counselor to Joseph Smith III in the reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And he meets with their Council of 12. And the Council of 12 asks him specifically, did Joseph Smith practice polygamy? And he replies by saying that Hiram Smith brought the revelation before the High Council. And the way that he's responding to a question on polygamy makes us realize that he is talking about this 132, that it was brought before the High Council on that day.
Okay, so a skeptic point of view would say, well, this is probably after 1860 now.
Right,
so
well,
it's too
actually,
late.
most of the skeptics will say that this is the one point of evidence that they have a very difficult time resolving.
Thanks for listening, and I hope you to continue to enjoy Gospel Tangents. Consider becoming a Patreon or go to gospeltangents.com/shop, and you can get a cool tie, a hat, or even a nice mug. You can also get a sweatshirt. So check it out at gospeltangents.com/shop.